Welcome everybody to another episode of the Pocho podcast. I'm here as hosting another one with another interview. I guess we'll have a discussion here with Albert Perez. Albert, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
How's it going, Beto? What's going on? How's the pandemic treating you out there in Texas?
It's doing. I mean, not ideal, but it's we're getting through it.
Well, we're here in my neck of the woods in San Bernardino County, which is next to LA County. You know, it's practically back to normal. Everything has just imagine everything has pretty much opened up already.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Pretty a lot of discussion to go along with that, but yeah, pandemic times, battling through it. But so yeah, we're here to discuss this sort of topic that came up again. It surges. It comes up every now and then. On the Twitters, I guess this time. I think Eugene Rapinski, he brought up a tweet from, I guess in Philadelphia. He's from Philadelphia, about the Philadelphia Union starting a podcast, or somebody starting a podcast in Spanish, or the idea of a podcast in Spanish. And the guy asked, would that interest the Latinos in the Philly area? So that was the question. And Eugene, of course, says, yes, I think it would be good to see how that works out. And that's not a surprising thing. Francisco responds and says, I doubt many Latinos that only speak Spanish or prefer to consume content in Spanish are interested in MLS. So that's the whole MLS versus LigaMX type of controversy. And then Eugene responds saying, for me, Spanish-speaking MLS content is as vital as English-speaking LigaMX content. It's all about making it accessible to a wider audience. So here we go back to like what we do, like myself and the guys at Cantina MX, FootMX guys, all the other English, hashtag English, or Liga MX English guys who do podcasts. And then Francisco sort of responds that, it's not really the same for Liga MX. You have a broader audience because you have the X factor of hipsters who want to get into Mexican. I think it sort of is the same because, well, it might be to a lesser extent. So, what are your thoughts on English let's just say Spanish content for Spanish speakers in the U.S. on MLS teams, like the Philadelphia Union coming up with a podcast in Spanish? Is that going to be like a hit? What do you think? What's the attraction there?
Well, let me give you my introductory spiel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Per my experience with the Los Angeles Times in Spanish, I learned that this content in Spanish does not draw very well. When I was working where our numbers, they were just not up to par with our boxing or our MMA or even some of the Mexican soccer stuff we post. So I honestly, I do not think there's a fertile market for MLS for MLS content in Spanish. Obviously, with Chicharito and Bella, there has been some sort of an interest, but I think as a whole, especially when you get into specific situations, like with the Philly Union market, or I had the same conversation with a guy that does a podcast for Rouse Salt Lake. He was telling me, oh, they give us a lot of access up here. I'm well, because it's a small market. I mean, try getting Chicharito with the Galaxy as a podcaster and see how that goes. So like I said, I do not think the market for Spanish MLS content is as fertile as a lot of people wish it was.
Yeah, I agree. So in this same thread, Rigo's brother, I'll call him Rigo's brother because he is Rigo's brother. He comes in and says he's been to 2 MLS games, Orlando and New York City FC, MLS All-Stars and Atletico Madrid, and it's been mostly Hispanics at the stadiums. And he says, I hate the MLS as far as quality goes, but to think that Latinos wouldn't give MLS a chance is crazy. They already do. Okay, so the distinction here that I think is going to Hispanics going to these games. I think Hispanics, Mexicans, Guatemalans, whatever type of Hispanics are there at these games are interested because they have football in their past, in their family's history, like their great grandparents, their grandparents, or even their parents might have loved soccer and watched it on TV. So them as Hispanics in the United States might want to see soccer, so they go to a soccer game, but they don't necessarily have some allegiance or some fandom to like an America or an Argentina national team where they have to follow it in Spanish. These Hispanics might very well not even know Spanish, but they're just going because they have a history in their family of soccer. So they go to an MLS All-Star game, they go to an Orlando City, and they could be very much all English speaking Hispanics who don't know
Yeah.
Spanish. And then so the premise of a Spanish speaking MLS podcast is going to be like of not a non-issue to them. They're not going to want
Yeah,
to.
you can't make that assumption just by looking at the last names or at the color of their skin. I mean,
Yeah,
like I said, and I've used it with the Liga MX English community. If you're following a certain league, most likely you already you started following it in the native language of that league, which in MLS is English,
yeah,
and for Liga MX is Spanish. So most likely you're not gonna be consuming the content in another language because you started consuming that certain league in a certain language. For example, with the L3 in English community, they tell, oh, there's content, there's a lot of fans, this and that. When you look at their Twitter page, Mi Selección en Español has over 6 million followers. And the English page, I have to admit, it's a couple years. It's been around for a couple years, but it's fairly new. It only has 60,000. So what does that tell you? That people that follow El Tri, you do it in Spanish, even though they speak English or they were born here, they follow in Spanish because that's how they absorb that certain product at first.
yeah, exactly. I could even go back to further proof, and on if you've ever watched the transmissions that they had for Liga MX games in English by I think Nico Cantor. This was Facebook stream. It wasn't even on like regular Liga TV.
Yeah, they would do
But
it Pavel, and they would have a good talent on there.
yeah, I mean, Nico. I remember Nico, and I think what's the other guy's Sandoval or
Ramses, yeah,
Ramses. Yeah, those
yeah,
two would do the broadcast in English. Okay,
yeah.
covering Mexican League or Liga MX, and all of the. It was funny because you go and watch the broadcast on Facebook. All of the comments and people chatting about it were all
We're
speaking Spanish,
Yeah,
and they were like,
yeah,
"What is this in English for? What are we watching over here?" So that's further proof of like
sure.
English is like we are a small niche. We are a few guys doing this Cantina podcast, Footmex, Eagle Eye podcast, Lions Den, and all this stuff. We are a little dot in the map of what's going
Yeah.
on in interest. That's
You
just
know
the way it
what's
is.
another? You know what's a good example of this situation? Which it's not soccer related. It's related to basketball. In 2012, Time Warner Sports, which is now Spectrum, they started Time Warner Deportes right here in Los Angeles. And one of the while they were doing Galaxy games in Spanish, one of the big draws was por primera vez vamos a hacer juegos de los Lakers totalmente en español con producción en español.
Uh-huh.
But the ratings, I was reading an LA Times article, it wasn't more than a few thousand, and they ended up killing the channel in 2018. And obviously, this is PR words, but the notice said that they realized that people that follow the NBA most likely do it in English, not in Spanish. So that's the way they excuse the bad ratings.
Yeah, that's true.
So and
Especially
over.
yeah, especially sort of like on the NBA thing because I grew up, in the United States as an NBA fan, Michael Jordan and the Bulls and all that stuff. Um, I think, and then I've lived in Mexico with the same type of interest, and I've seen the NBA on Mexico in Spanish in Mexico. Now there is some interest for it to be broadcast in Mexico, but I think once Mexicans go to the United States, then that interest is, well, they're in the United States, their kids, really get into the NBA, but their kids by then are already speaking English. They're already
Yeah, yeah.
understanding English. So it's like, okay, why watch it in Spanish anymore in the United States when I could pretty much dominate the English language enough to grasp it?
Yeah.
So
For example, in my case, well, I'm fluent in both languages, but I mean, the only reason I would watch Monday Night Football on ESPN Deportes was because I did not have my package did not have English ESPN, and it's not that ESPN Deportes wasn't a good broadcast. It was just I'm just used to hearing it in English, and it's comfort like when you wear no pair of tennis shoes.
yeah. So further on in this thread, let's see. I think Rigo's brother says enough speak Spanish to where you can say Spanish-speaking Hispanics have interest in MLS, even if it's a niche group like Central Americans just wanting to see their favorite player from their country. And this happens like in LigaMX, like South Americans, if they want to watch Rogelio Funes Mori on Monterrey, like you might see some Argentinians turn on a Liga MX Monterrey game. That's going to be like a small niche though. And then we sort of get into, and then I bring up the crumbs comment, and that's by no means like disrespect, even though like crumbs is crumbs, you know. And I admit I do this podcast, I do the Cantina podcast, and we don't get huge thousands, millions of viewers, but it's
But it's a work
fun.
of love. It's something you like to do.
Yeah, it's fun like we're doing this, we're talking, and it's an
Yeah,
enjoyable. We learn from each other, and the
yeah.
same with all the other
I'm not making a
podcasts.
dime from this, but I enjoy talking about these matters with you.
I enjoy my crumbs. It's like my own
Yeah,
crumbs, man. Some
yeah,
good
yeah.
some good crumbs, dude.
It was from it's like when you get the paste from a conchita, that's left over in the bag. It's pretty good.
Yeah. See, I've never said like I think the accusation was that you know, and I think some people like I would actually hope I would like for like Tom, Marshall, Wiso, and all these dudes to make it big, man, to be on like a Univision in English channel on TV. Like if there was a permanent channel that talks soccer and talked football mexicano, but in English, and then you could have Tom Marshall instead of being like I think he was a guest like one time long ago on Football Picante, and he spoke in Spanish. Instead of
Yeah,
Tom doing that, Tom could have his own show and he could host his own thing
yeah.
on some. But like for that to even happen, like I don't think it ever would, but I would love that it would. Like so, when the accusation is of like the point of having a podcast is so we can have thousands of listeners and then make a living off of it. Like we probably don't really think okay that's gonna happen, but who's not gonna want it to happen? Like what if a miracle does happen and it eventually comes to pass?
Yeah.
Um,
Here's my view with this thing, and I've had several conversations on heated conversations on Twitter with this. When you do something like this, you got to look at it as a hobby, as a work of love. Obviously, there's some people that have lucked out; they have gotten jobs, but to expect to make a career out of it is at least unless you got some good financial backing or you're really outstanding. It's kind of naive, and I saw that a lot of members from the English Liga MX and English community they got a little worked up when I don't know if it was Caesar or Tom Marshall they tweeted out a lot of these a lot of these people out here with the Twitter pages from for particular teams are doing the job that Liga MX teams do not want to do. So then a lot of these guys felt empowered and they started making pages for teams like San Luis or like Querétaro, real oddball teams, and
yeah,
they started repeating the same thing. Oh, we're doing the job. No, you're not doing. And I told them, no, you're not doing a job. It's a hobby. I mean, how many followers do you have? It's a work of love. I mean, yeah, you might get lucky and get a job, but at the end of the day, it's not a profession.
yeah. I think that's a good point because it seemed like there was some negativity towards a Mexican club, like say I don't know how many. I think they even kept track of like out of all the Mexican clubs. these clubs are the only ones that have an English Twitter account, or the Mexican national team didn't have an English Twitter account for a long time, and they're getting like railed and stuff, and then all of a sudden they come out with an English Twitter account, and everyone's like, "Hey, hooray! You're doing what's right. You're feeding your audience." Um, and obviously, I think of, okay, so say a San Luis, they don't have an English account. If Are they going to go out and say, the English demand for our content is so great, I'm going to hire a full-time guy to run our Twitter and pay him money, and we're going to use that as an expense. What are you getting back from that expense from a
Exactly. What?
niche small
Yeah.
group? So is it even worth it for these guys? These guys might be in their clubs thinking, oh, well, yeah, English accounts and English content for our club has come across our board's table and our executives table, and we've looked at the numbers and our viewership and all this stuff, and we're thinking, nope, it's not worth it. We're not doing English content. Our content is in Mexico. Our content's in Spanish. And even
Yeah.
in the United States, our content in the United States, the people who watch LigaMX for the most part in the United States speak Spanish. That's why Univision is in Spanish and all these channels are in Spanish, not in English.
I was talking about this with a good friend of mine that worked for that used to work for a team in the Mexican League, and I asked him how come your team is the only one with is one of the few ones with English content, and I understand why they had English content. It's a border team, but the rest of the teams, how come they haven't at all? Because honestly, they see no need for it. I mean, they're not worried in the English market, in the English speaking market of the U.S. They assume that people that follow them, do it in Spanish. So why invest in something that they do not see necessary?
Yeah, and I assume you're talking about Xolos. And Xolos is a unique situation because Tijuana is right there next to San Diego. And San Diego isn't like El Paso. Well, El Paso's sort of big as well, but San Diego is, it's got like a huge market.
No, and
There,
I understand they're why they were doing English content. I mean, there was a there was a market for it in San Diego, since San Diego is not a an MLS market. Obviously, there was a market, and it was a I mean, it's a sizable market, so I can understand that. But as a whole, I do not I do I agree that I do not them seeing it as a necessity.
yeah, because I would even say, like, you hear about what's his name, the El Gringo Xolo. Like, you hear about that dude in his YouTube videos of him going, he's an American that goes to the Xolo games.
Yeah, and you
That's
see
like one
a
dude
lot.
though.
Yeah,
Like how many dudes? Like out of
yeah,
all of the Mexicans in Estadio Caliente, there's probably still a very
yeah.
minor part that are Americans.
It's a niche fan base, but I mean, I would probably say they have the outside of Chivas and America, they probably do have the largest English speaking fan base
Yeah,
in Mexican soccer.
yeah, and this sort of goes to, I guess, sort of to finalize my thoughts is the power of Spanish speaking Mexicans as opposed to like Pochos or whatever. You see clubs like Leverkusen when Chicharito was there, or other clubs, I can't think of them offhand. West Ham might have created Spanish speaking accounts because of Chicharito. And then you see the hordes because, Chicharito is no normal guy and he doesn't have some small fan base. Hordes of Mexicans, just following Leverkusen Spanish Twitter account or West Ham Spanish Twitter account to buy
Or
a
with
West
that,
Ham jersey. Because
or with go for it.
yeah, because they're getting profits, right? They're getting all these
Yeah.
Mexicans buying their West Ham jersey or their Leverkusen jersey or their Chicharito jersey from Manchester United. They're seeing the benefits. So these guys are like, yeah, let's play to the Mexican crowd and get their likes, get their purchases, make money off them.
You know who has gone all in on this? Raúl Jimenez's team of Wolverhampton.
Yeah,
They've totally they practically built their marketing around Raúl.
yeah, and that's smart because
Yeah.
Mexicans, like some people, Mexicans got the money. They got that spending money to go buy those jerseys, and you see it, especially the United States Mexicans. You see it all over uh, El Tri or LigaMX English. Everybody with their West Ham jersey, buying their Raúl Jimenez, or not their West Ham, their Wolves jersey, buying their Raúl Jimenez jerseys and stuff.
You know what I really was before this pandemic. What I really wanted to see was how well Chicharito produced ratings and attention for MLS within the Mexican and the Spanish speaking community, because that was that supposedly that was why his hiring made it a bigger deal than Beckham's, because he was going to pull in that that vaunted Mexican Spanish speaking Latino fan base. And from the few game, I think they played one or two home games. They said it wasn't a complete sellout. That it that the fanfare was kind of lukewarm. But as the season progressed, especially when they were going to get around to play the El Tráfico versus Carlos Vela, I wanted to see how big the hype was.
Yeah, that's an interesting point also to this thing, because I don't, and you're in LA, so you know more than I do. But I've heard from other people from LA saying, what makes up the fan base for the LA Galaxy? What makes up the fan base for LAFC? Chicharito goes to LA Galaxy. A lot of Mexicans might say, well, he left Europe. He's a failure. And then all the drama with him saying he's a legend and like justifying his move to MLS when all the haters were getting on him.
Or
So
that video with Derbez when he calls Chicharito one of us, but 6 months later Chicharito is saying that he has the fame and the millions that many would want.
yeah, so like
Stuff like that.
yeah, you have to understand. Yeah, you have to understand like who is the fan base for LA Galaxy. If it's a bunch of Central Americans and Mexicans aren't really interested in it, then they're not going to get a sellout. They're not going to
Yeah.
get the fan
Look,
base they were looking for.
this is, I mean, for many years from going to Galaxy games, as a fan, not a fan of the team, just a fan of soccer and going to go cover games. There's a good obviously during the Beckham years, it was mostly and it was because the team openly went out to look for him. It was mostly the crowd from the affluent beach cities right there near Carson, like
Uh,
Hermosa Beach and right there.
uh-huh.
And then after that, eventually went going back to what it was. It was you had Mexican. I'm not going to deny they had Mexican American fans, but a lot of that Latino fan base was also composed by Central people of a Central American background, and that's what mostly conforms the team. And with the LAFC, it's a different crowd. It's more of that hardcore Latino crowd, like the type you see in the rafters at Staples Center or
Uh,
at the Pavilion in Dodger Stadium. Is that more hardcore? While they do have Central American fans, it's what I take from it. It's a large Mexican American. It's composed by a large Mexican American base.
yeah, so I think that goes along to where if you're in the United States, if you're in LA, you're sort of, as time passes and as generations pass, you sort of distance yourself from Mexico and from even like your home club, or not really home, in parentheses home club, like say an America or Chivas, and then you identify with what's local. Like you want to go to a local game, to an LA Galaxy or LAFC game. You don't want you forget about your if Chivas or if America was in your past, you sort of forget about it. So
I
yes,
know, I know this. I know. Well, in my personal experience, one of the leaders of the 352 for the LAFC, one of his names is El Chiva Mayor, because he used to be before even Chivas USA. He was a big Chivas fan, and then he started the small group of followers for Chivas USA. Then they moved on to LAFC, and I always tell them this. Let's say Chivas was playing LAFC in a Champions League, CONCACAF Champions League playoff game. Who do you go for? And he just laughs, and he would just laughs. He's never given me a full answer.
yeah. Yeah, there's
But I mean,
conflict.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's
And
conflict.
there's a lot of that, but there's also like a lot of what you say, like people go with what's near them, and they may have been Cruz Azul fans, but you know what? LAFC has a hell of a ambience and a good team, so let's I'm
Yeah,
LAFC now,
yeah.
so
And you might not make the trip to watch a Cruz Azul game ever, so you sort of lose that
yeah, it's new story.
connection.
And to be honest, as of right now, and because obviously the team is doing good, LAFC is a hell of a party. It gives you a lot of bang for your buck.
Yeah, I'm impressed. Yeah, I was impressed. I
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
was interested in seeing those videos of when the LAFC fan base went to Leon, and they're speaking English in interviews and things like that, but there are chants in Spanish and their songs and stuff. It was an interesting environment.
And they drew from good inspiration. They have molded a lot of what they do after what they do at the Borussia Dortmund Stadium. I went there on a trip covering the German Cup 2 years ago, and I was like, a lot of this looks familiar, like the way they raise their scars, and it was because a group of their fans they flew out to when the team was barely forming. They flew out there to get some inspiration, and they have given it its flavor. They have incorporated stuff that the Dortmund fans do, which is awesome, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yes, this is interesting subject to continue to discuss. But yeah, we've I think gone on for 26 minutes. Any I guess to wind it down, any final thoughts or things that you think we missed on touching?
Just to close on these projects on social media regarding LigaMX, MLS Spanish, and whatnot. I'm gonna tell you what my Chicano studies professor told me at Pasadena City College 20 years ago. He was telling us about all these books about the Chicano movement that he wrote. And being a foolish 18-year-old kid, I asked him, "Oh, it wasn't with Malinten. It was, oh, how many bestsellers do you have?" And he was honest, and he wasn't offended. He told me, "You know what? When you do the stuff like this, you don't do it for the money. It's a work of love." And honestly, I think that's what all these projects are a work of love. Unless you really put some good money into it, then and you're looking for money. That's what it is. And if you get an opportunity, well, more power to you.
Yeah, yeah, go for it. And that
Yeah.
would be great if if this work of love for those that have merit, those that put out a good product, and like you said, invest. If they do some investing and it works out for something great, then yeah, I would be totally elated to see that. To see
And,
some of these podcasts, some of these Twitter guys just blow up.
and honestly, with the World Cup coming around, and the World Cup, the Mexican American World Cup coming along in 6 years, I could see a lot of these young guys getting opportunity, especially with companies looking to amplify their coverage, and seeing that there's going to be, obviously, during that time there's going to be an appetite for this type of coverage, and I could see a lot. I could see Wiso Vasquez working for CBS or NBC, something like that, and and that'll be great.
Yeah, because for me, I mean, like I have already enjoyed the content that that a lot of people like we saw and some of the other guys put out, especially in video format when they go to games, when they go to like press conferences or interviews, or even with the fans, like when they interview fans and show videos of the stadium and things that are going on, or like one of famous videos was I mean, not famous, but it was like when the Mexican fans were getting into it with the United States fans at one of the U.S. versus Mexico games, and one of the U.S. fans, he was like, uh, I don't think he was Mexican, but he was of Hispanic descent, and he was speaking Spanish, and he said, "Estados Unidos te da de comer." He was yelling that to the Mexican fans, and I
Yeah.
was just like, oh, and that thing sort of blew up.
And then you have the one that Weasel did when the 2-0 was broken, and when the 2-0 was broken and Trump had barely been elected, where Weasel got that the white fan saying we love you guys, we love you Mexicans, we love you guys, it's and stuff like that, which that was a pretty beautiful video.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good moments. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the attention or the market that it's reaching is not ideal at the moment, and
yeah.
it probably will
It's
never.
a work in progress
Yeah.
and there's a lot of climbing to do because like I said, the ground is not that fertile, but like I said, with that 2026 World Cup around here, honestly I would I even guarantee it a lot of guys are going to get some breaks.
Yeah, that would be great. So yeah, it's no, and there's no problem with continuously climbing, continuously putting out and working in this I
Yeah,
guess labor of love, like you said.
yeah.
So
Old timers like us may not be may not be able to enjoy it, but the young cats, the young cats.
yeah, we should talk about that because a lot of like a lot of the fire and a lot of the energy
Yeah,
is I guess lies a lot with the youth, with the younger dudes to go out and do these things. I know, especially one
yeah,
guy on our Cantina podcast who's like, I mean, he's sort of like you. I mean, I got to get you on to the Cantina podcast to talk to him because he's really like him and Joel were back in the day writing and covering like in the German World Cup and back in those World Cups back then, and or even before before that LigaMX in Mexico, and they just
yeah,
have like a history of information, and
yeah,
right
yeah,
now they're just like covering it right now. I did that in the past. I had all the energy in the past. Right now, I'm just enjoying stuff. I'm not about to. Sometimes they make it out to the Cantina podcast, but it's not like
yeah.
I gotta be on the Cantina podcast and promote our efforts and do all this stuff. But
Well, all this is very time consuming. I mean, setting
yeah,
up, editing, especially when you write. I mean, you think about it. A good article takes you 2 to 3 hours. That's 2 to 3 hours that you're dedicating for no pay from usually you have a 9 to 5, so you're usually dedicating that time for for a project that's not paying you. So it
yeah.
takes a lot of dedication.
You can only do it so long, I guess.
Yeah.
The older guys get cynical and and tired of it. So, well, yeah, man. Thanks Albert for
Oh,
joining.
you know what other topic we should cover in the future? The
Yeah,
generational gap between in the LigaMX in English community, and you know where the line is drawn. Like you could tell how many El Tri fans in English are from a certain age, because when they talk about the most heartbreaking loss in World Cup history for them, they mention they literally the first thing they mention is the no era penal. But when you ask another group from maybe 35 onward, I don't even know. I haven't talked about this with you. Which one has been the most heartbreaking loss for you?
the 2-0.
Exactly. See, there's a great generation gap, and there's something we could talk about it in
Yeah,
the future.
that's a good topic. I want to write that down. We'll definitely do that.
All right,
That's a
yeah,
great one.
definitely. Invite me back. Invite me back.
I see some bashing of millennials in the future.
Uh, I don't want to say it, but
Yeah,
I advise them
it's all
to
good.
read up on their information.
It's all good. We appreciate the Zoomers.
Yeah, hey, everybody helps in these type of projects.
Yeah, it's all entertainment. Well, thanks for coming on.
All right, Beto,
Yeah.
stay safe out there, man.
All right. Have a good one.
Take it easy.